The government is tossing up whether to make the upcoming referendum on legalising marijuana a binding one. Even if the referendum is not binding, there is now enough political support to change the law if the public votes in favour. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Bramwell.
A referendum on legalising the personal use of marijuana is part of the confidence and supply agreement between the Greens and Labour. Under the deal, the referendum will be held at or before the 2020 general election. Nationals leader Simon Bridges says a national-led government would enact a law change if that's what New Zealanders want.
I think we've got to. We've got to go with what the people want and what a referendum tells us. Obviously we've got a bit of water to go under the bridge. We've got to see the question. We're going to have an informed debate, I hope, on the issue. But absolutely, in principle, we support referendums and their outcomes.
The acting Prime Minister, Winston Peters, always a fan of referendums, would also support a law change.
Well, look, we don't believe in fake democracy. The referendum is a form of democracy. If the question's going to the people's answer will be paramount, yes.
The Executive Director of the Drug Foundation, Ross Bell, says public support for a law change is growing.
We've conducted a poll over the last 3 years and we've seen during the course of that time an upward trend in support for reform, whether it's decriminalisation for personal use or whether it's legalisation for medical use. So I think the public support is increasing. The public, I think, are getting much more informed about what's happening in the world. I think there's agreement that our current approach isn't working.
Mr Bell says there's now a maturity in the debate around drugs and the issue is becoming less of a political football.
I think politicians understand that these issues are more complex. It's no longer a black and white issue. Platitudes aren't going to get us anywhere. We've seen that around synthetic cannabis deaths. We've seen that around medical cannabis debates. That there is so much complexity and nuance that politicians have to show much more responsibility.
The Justice Minister, Andrew Little, says the government is considering what kind of referendum will be held.
One of the decisions that government is going to make is whether it's a binding referendum, which would mean that once the decision is made, then the government will follow through on it. In order for a binding referendum to take place, there has to be a reasonable degree of specificity and certainty about what would follow a yes vote. So these are considerations that we're dealing with at the moment.
Andrew Little says he expects to take papers to Cabinet in the next couple of months. The government also has to decide whether to hold the referendum before the 2020 election or at the same time, bearing in mind that there's also likely to be a referendum held on voluntary euthanasia. Atu I te whare pārimata mō te hōtaka o te ahi pōnei, ko Chris Bramalaho.
We would, of course, love your feedback on that. Do text us 2101. We'll conduct our own referendum, although it probably won't be binding.